Oh, bloody hell, I've started. Well, I wasn't expecting that to happen. I was just arranging some stuff, and here I am. So, it's Mark's NOTCAST. My name is Mark. This is not a podcast, so it's a NOTCAST. And I'm just a middle-aged dude with no hair. This isn't in my mum's basement, by the way. This is my own spare man cave. And I'm talking about records that I like to an audience of literally nobody on YouTube. So, hello. Today, I'm going to be talking about a band called The Mission, who you may or may not have heard of. If you haven't heard of them, they're probably the most conventional rock band that I do like. I'm talking about their second record, released in 1988. It is called Children, and here is a vinyl copy from way back then. If it's been repressed since then, I have no idea, to be honest. No idea. The Mission are like a number of bands from around about that period have been kind of, I think, somewhat insultingly written out of history. So when people talk about, music of the past, it's like there's this huge vacant lot, like a bleak wasteland between the end of the Smiths in 1987 and then the rise of the Stone Roses in 1989, and bands which were absolutely humongous at the time, including The Mission, and obviously The Wonder Stuff, Probably Yourself, Ned's Atomic Dustbin. Loads of bands like that. Sisters of Mercy, for example, seem to have been written out of history. Nobody really talks about them, and I think that's a real shame. I think there's some cultural revisionism then. Now, you could look at the 60s and think about bands like Velvet Underground and go, well, nobody talks about the Kinks or, I don't know, Fleetwood Mac in the early days before they became a girl band or whatever. And maybe that's the same kind of thing that's happening here. But for people of my age, I was 15 in 1988, we lived this stuff, we breathed it, we read it through the pages of the Melody Maker, The Enemy, and the sadly departed Sounds. And this was part of our experience growing up. I think, the Stone Roses were barely a twinkle in people's eyes. The Smiths were dead on arrival. Depeche Mode and New Order, well, they went through a phase of being uncool alongside The Cure. In fact, lots of bands went through a period of being uncool in the 90s and the noughties, and suddenly they're all hip again, and loads of people have crawled out of the woodwork saying, The Cure are always my favourite band. And I'm like, where were you in 2012? Probably playing golf. Yes, another unnecessary dig at golf, but I don't like golf. Any opportunity I have to mock that most tawdry of games, I will do. If you like golf, then fine, but the price you have to pay if you watch this is occasionally I'm going to take the piss out of the thing that you like. Actually, to be fair, I think all fandoms need to be able to laugh at the thing that they love, and to be able to mock it, and to be able to understand its weaknesses and love it all the same. Much like the mole on Marilyn Monroe's face, is that you have to be attentive to the weaknesses as well as the strengths. And The Mission as a band, they did have some weaknesses at the time, and I'm sure I'm going to get into them. There's one of the reasons why they're not one of my very favourite bands on the planet, unlike this band, U2. Now, I don't have many Mission t-shirts because I don't particularly like the t-shirts that they sell. And when you wear and buy a band t-shirt, you're wearing an advert for a band. So there's a graphic design there. There's a set of cultural values that you're associating with yourself by wearing a t-shirt for Nine Inch Nails or Marilyn Manson or Neil Gaiman or whoever. And you then have to go, well, is that something that I still need or want to ally myself to at this age? Are these going to be things that I'm going to want to be part of me as I grow up? Thank God I haven't got any Neil Gaiman or Marilyn Manson tattoos, or Roman Polanski ones for that matter, or Kevin Spacey ones. So that's good news, isn't it? And he's talked himself into a corner. Oops. Luckily, The Mission's many foibles are all documented in this Heady Days, The Mission Years 1985 to 1990, a paperback autobiography written by the Wayne of Huss. I have a signed copy here, signed by Wayne, which I bought from the Rough Trade Bookshop. This is his autobiography detailing the day from the day he left the Sisters of Mercy to the day that Simon Hinkler left the Mission in early 1990. And that means this period that I'm talking about right now is quite literally from the Huss's mouth, is there. And I suppose probably the album Children itself, it kind of started off with U2 having the Mission as their support band at Leeds Elland Road in 1987 on the Joshua Tree tour, where this T-shirt was sold. And they met a man called John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones, for those of you who aren't aware, is the bass player and keyboard strings guy for Led Zeppelin. Also a producer who's very good at production work. And to be honest, the Mission always wanted to be Led Zeppelin. They never really hit it. You know, they did a lot of songs that sounded very much like they could have been Led Zeppelin songs. And Children is an album that's absolutely enthralled to, let me guess, probably Houses of the Holy, I would have thought, is probably the most obvious Mission album, probably the most obvious Led Zeppelin album that the Mission stole huge amounts from. You know, Stairway to Heaven is a song that when you listen to something like Tower of Strength, you can clearly see that the Mission are aspiring to do that type of huge, aspirant, world-conquering rock, and generally doing it very successfully. Although perhaps where Led Zeppelin were better is because they were bigger and they arrived 15 years sooner, and their lyrics were... Actually, Led Zeppelin's lyrics were still pretty rubbish, weren't they? That one about "let me squeeze the lemon till the juice runs down your legs." Good God. What were you thinking, Percy? What were you thinking? Were you thinking? Thinking with a little head instead of the big one. And there's certainly some lyrics on Children that have that effect. The band's previous producer was Tim Palmer, and he was overlooked because of John Paul Jones and because of the Led Zeppelin connection. And at that point, Mission live shows, and there were lots of them, were huge, fast, enormous steamrollers. It was like being strapped to the front of a runaway train whilst playing a guitar and singing about ancient mythology whilst wearing a very big hat. Some of those shows are documented on this lovely release, The Mission Live at the BBC, a 3 CD box set featuring live performances from the Reading Festival, Manchester Apollo in 1990, Wembley Arena in 1988, and a whole bunch of studio sessions as well. So much so that when Iggy saw them at the Reading Festival in 1987, his advice was slow down a bit. And that's a really, really good bit of advice, because if nothing else, drummers get tired, and not everyone can play as fast in their 70s as they did in their 20s. Just ask Nico McBrain. Watteau said it Ed Trebonk, the former drummer for Iron Maiden. And the songs on Children are I think, wider, better, more fluent than the songs on the previous First Chapter album and the God's Own Medicine album. But at the same point, they are very clearly influenced by things that were never on the Sisters of Mercy's menu. And I say the Sisters of Mercy because obviously Wayne and Craig from the Mission were respectively guitarist and bass player for the Sisters of Mercy. And when you think about the Sisters of Mercy in 1987, I think about obviously Floodland, but I also think about the influence of bands like Suicide and the Stooges. You don't hear any of those influences on Children. Children is probably the best Led Zeppelin album that Led Zeppelin never made. And in the same year that this came out, 1988, the Cult, I think, were touring Electric, which is the best album AC/DC never made. The same kind of thing, bands wearing their influences very, very heavily on their sleeves. So the album was recorded in, I think, Rockfield Studios in Wales, where The Cure recently recorded the Songs of a Lost World album. And then it was mixed at the Townhouse in Shepherd's Bush. And that was the same studio at the same time as Queen were recording the Miracle album. And oh man, what a fascinating thing Queen would have been if Freddie had lived and the band had stayed together to this day. But that wasn't the path that Live gave us. Also, at this point, I think the Mission, although they're presented as a united four-piece, as clearly indicated in, I think, the photo that's on the inside of the Salad Days album, this one here, shot under the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio de Janeiro in December 1988. Every band has to have a captain and a leader. So you think about the way any band's dynamic works, is that there's always one guy who has the vision. He's the guy that points in a direction and goes, over there, we're going to climb that mountain, we're going to headline that arena, we're going to do that thing. And the other guys in the band, when you've got a band that's made out of four leaders, things can get really tricky. So you think about any band that is successful, you think, who's the guy that leads it? Well, for the Mission, it's obviously Wayne Hussey. For U2, it's probably Bono. You know, for Depeche Mode, you probably would go, well, it's Martin Gore, for example. Oasis, clearly Noel Gallagher, the smartest man in the room. Even bands whose lineups have changed have remained exactly the same all the way through. There's normally one guy who's steering it more than anybody else. Peter Buck in REM, for example, probably Neil Peart in Rush, come to think of it, even though Geddy and Alex were strong, and obviously Robert Smith in The Cure. So the notion of a committee works in so much as obviously there's multiple viewpoints, and every band has that, and every band has sometimes lineup changes, but also every band needs a prime minister or a captain, and that was what was happening here, is that Wayne was coming to the fore with the songs, and the songs on the album are pretty good. First thing I will say is that it sold 100,000 copies in the UK alone in its first week. The band were on an ascent. If you were going to be predicting what direction are the Mission going to go in, you wouldn't have been far wrong in saying they were going to have the same kind of trajectory as U2, is that they would go and they would make album after album after album. They'd have the same lineup all the way through, and at the end they'd be standing at the top of the statue, where perhaps you might even look at the statue of Christ the Redeemer and think, bloody man, he thinks he's bloody Wayne Hussey, doesn't he? Much like that joke about Bono. But that's not quite how it happens. This was the second of 3 albums made by this lineup, and at that point, which is another episode, the Mission kind of peaked. So you think about if U2 had peaked at the point where they did War, if Depeche Mode had peaked at the point where they did Black Celebration, this is the kind of point that the Mission were at around about here, is that they were at the apex of what they could do. They started off touring. They did 7 shows at the London Astoria to 2,000 people a night, the record for the London Astoria. By the time they came back in December, they were headlining arenas. The Birmingham NEC, a shithole. Wembley Arena, a shithole. And obviously other places less big but equally important on the gig calendar, such as the now demolished St Austell Coliseum in Cornwall. The first release from the album, and this is probably where I need to pick up the tale in a more cohesive fashion, as opposed to leaping around left, right and centre, was the Tower of Strength. And if you don't know the Mission, you know Tower of Strength. This is the epic. It's a fabulous, brilliant song built on a Kashmir style riff, and that's the Kashmir Led Zeppelin, not Kashmir, the coat. And it came in a multitude of versions and formats with lots of different B-sides that were on it. Well, we have the standard 7-inch here, which comes in a stippled textured sleeve. If you can see that there, you can look at, and what you can see is all this very, almost like this fucked up braille that's on there. It doesn't necessarily signify anything, and it's backed with 2 tracks, Fabian, which was not on the vinyl version of the album, and Breathe, a vocal version of the track. So you've got 2 new B-sides on the single, Myth 4. And this went to number 12 in the UK charts. It was described as pompous and facile as anything else the Mission have produced, which is a nice way of saying that it is pompous, it is facile, it is reaching and aspiring for greatness, and it achieves it musically. Lyrically, it's very good, actually. It's probably the strongest, or one of the strongest Mission lyrics that there are. And it was a strange and unusual track because, to be honest, Mick doesn't really play drums on it. He programmed the drum machine, and the traditional drum fills that you've got on Tower of Strength were caused by an error in the programming protocol, the SMTPE protocol in there, where the drum machine kind of threw a wobbler and threw these drum fills in, which became an essential part of the song. And John Paul Jones also played bass on this particular track. He played the basic riff, looped it, and then Craig played over the top of it. So the rhythm track that you've got on Tower of Strength isn't actually the Mission overall. It's Mick programming some drums and John Paul Jones off the Led Zeppelins. And you've also got on here just this fabulous aspiring epic. One would say it would be a perfect riposte to the Sisters This Corrosion in both its pompous epicness and its huge aspirant vision, but they're two very different beasts. This Corrosion is the sound of the apocalypse, and Tower of Strength is the sound of rebuilding. If you think of that ancient Tower of Babylon that was in, oh, God knows what exactly, I can't remember, you know, some ancient myth that never got built. That's what Tower of Strength looks like and feels like, is this huge tower that's reaching to the sky, trying to touch the heavens and make them real. And it's one of the best songs that the Mission have. Yes, I've seen gigs where the Mission haven't even played it. That's a Wonderwall. But also at the same point, you don't need to play every song at every show, do you? Despite the fact that the National end every show with Vandal Crybaby Geeks. What an incredible song that is as well. Maybe I should talk about the National at some point, because I'm a sad dad as well. Or is it a glum mum? No, it's sad dad. So Tower of Strength only got to number 12 in the charts, yet is one of the band's biggest hits, and one of the songs that people remember. Not played often in indie discos, although to be fair, I haven't been to an indie disco for about 30 years, so I'm not really sure. I think I stopped going around about 2001. Actually, that's 25 years ago. Yeah, that's near enough to 30, that'll do. But it was never played there, because the Mission were out of fashion. You know, when I had my introduction to the world of rock and roll, it came through bands like the Mission and the Sisters of Mercy in the summer of 1990 and the summer of 1989, when I would go to the Barrel Organ in Birmingham. If you're from Birmingham and you're of that age, you will remember the Barrel Organ, a small tiny pub now called the Dubliner, with was called the Dubliner, with a flat roof that was small, tiny, about the size of a living room, deliberately darkened. All the curtains were shut as soon as 5 o'clock came. They played dark music to people with dark clothes and light, bright hair. And I remember I walked in and they were playing something, probably Alien Sex Fiends, Ignore the Machine, actually, which is a classic. My glasses steamed up, I couldn't see anything. I was handed a cider and black, and then all of a sudden, at the ripe old age of about 16, I was suddenly like, I'm home. This is my place. These are my people. So, Goths of the world unite. And I've just become old, because I am no longer 15, I'm 51, to quote the unusual Offspring track. Pretty old for a white bald dude. But it was just a moment where suddenly I thought, this is my place. I belong here. I feel at home here. And that in itself was something. So, Tower of Strength wasn't the Mission track that was played in those type of places. It was also something like Serpent's Kiss, or later on Deliverance. But Tower of Strength is a classic. Listen to it, love it, adore it. It's one of the best. And there's a remix 12-inch called We're Back to the Bombay Mix, which I think is remixed by Youth, but I could be wrong. Youth being for, oh, why is this got black in the sleeve? I don't know. I might have to, but lovely thick vinyl there, and it's backed with Fabian and Breathe vocal, cut to 45, produced by John Paul Jones. It's an epic. I think the Bombay mix is about 11 minutes long. The version mixed by Youth is on the 1994 remixes, so I'll skip those for now and talk about them at some other point. And on the standard UK 12-inch, I don't know if there was a CD single, actually. I don't. It was back to the standard 12-inch mix of Tower of Strength, the LP version, an instrumental version of Breathe, which isn't on the album, and Fabian, and a cover of Dream On by Aerosmith, the fucking awful Aerosmith, who do songs like Falling in Love is Hard on the Knees, and Love is Like an Elevator, Living It Up While I'm Going Down. What an awful, puerile lyric. Almost as bad as some which are on the next upcoming Mission record, Carved in Sand. But no, Tower of Strength is a classic. Only got to number 12, of course, in the UK pop charts, Pop Pickers, and was followed by the release of the third or second, depending on your point of view, album, Children. Here available on disc compact and on vinyl. Original first run of vinyl was on a gatefold sleeve. I wasn't able to buy it because I was looking for discounted copies. My discounted copy was not a gatefold sleeve. So the gatefold sleeve also came in a textured sleeve where the picture here, the crest with the child's face, was embossed, so you could touch it and feel it, and it got bigger. That bit was quite exciting, although this obviously perhaps not so much. And this is a good album. The vinyl is cut quite quiet, and it is missing 2 songs. It is missing, obviously, Fabian, which is 3 minutes 41, and Dream On, which is 3 minutes 58, which takes it about 52 minutes, and it's cut quiet because it is long. It's about 52, 53 minutes long on vinyl, so that's about 27 minutes a side. Best, your vinyl cut could take 34 minutes, but that would be very quiet and often jump. And these days, I'd recommend no more than probably 22 minutes per side. And simply because that's how vinyl works, gang. Also, 22 minutes is about the length of an episode of Coronation Street without adverts. So, if you want to watch that, or more correctly, if somebody else wants to watch that, you can plug your headphones in and listen to a record while somebody else is doing that. This opens with one of the best Mission songs ever. It's called Beyond the Pale. It's a tale of, or a bleak tale of decadence and of regret, and knowing you've gone too far only by going too far. You only know you've gone too far when you've got far too far, and you can't see how far was too far, if that makes sense. So some things like scientific experiments on the human body, you only know when you've gone too far, so to speak. You don't know your limits until you've exceeded them, is probably the best way of describing it. Maybe that should be a Hunter S. Thompson quote. And this song is, although it doesn't really necessarily make any sense of anything, but it's also, because the lyrics you can look at, and each individual line makes sense, but you put the whole thing together as a triptych or whatever, and it doesn't make sense. I'm going, what are you trying to communicate here? I'm a big lyrics guy. I know that, and I've probably told you that on at least half of the NOTCAST, which I've done so far. Lyrics are a really big deal to me, and Mission lyrics don't make sense to me. I'm not sure they do make sense. They make sense in a kind of abstract, oblique way that Nirvana lyrics make sense. Individual lines work, but if you try and put them together, it doesn't make sense as a narrative. It becomes like one of those comedians who just tells you, yes, take my wife, please. Yeah, exactly. Those type of things, as opposed to something that is builds together to be more than the sum of its parts. That is not a criticism. It's just I prefer my lyrics to be more obvious and to be more refined than the lyrics are on this. But Beyond the Pale, wow, what an incredible song. It's a song about politics. It's a song about excess, hedonism. It was the second single from the album. It got to number 32. Here's a 12-inch. Here's the CD single. And it's a fabulous track. Now, the CD single has the 7-inch edit, which in my opinion is an essential version of the song. It should be on compilation albums, but isn't. The 12-inch has, and this is I think the remix 12-inch, has the Armageddon mix of the track, which is huge and enormous and about 11 minutes long, and interspersed with, I think, samples. Oh, hello, Tinker, the cat has walked into the room. Interspersed with samples from First Blood, the Rambo movie, where I think, what is it, Richard Crenna, General Truffaut, I believe is called, or is it Major Truffaut, is called The Mission, John. Always remember The Mission. As the song kind of builds and builds and builds and becomes something very, very different indeed. And so, absolute classic, love it to bits, completely bloody ridiculous, as indeed all the best songs often are. And you can listen to these songs, you can listen to Tower of Strength, you can listen to some of the other songs on the album and think about them in the context of, are they rock songs or parodies of rock songs that are so good you don't even know they're parodies of rock songs? Well, I think if you listen to the Sisters of Mercy's Vision Thing album, which is clearly a parody of a Stooges album, you kind of go, I know what you're getting at here. With this, it's too close. It could pass for the real thing. And there comes a time when you do a parody of something, or maybe a mockery of it. Pink Floyd's Young Lust is a great example of that. And you can end up thinking, maybe it's so close to it, it's actually just rock. That the intention is so slight or so understated, it's invisible. And when that happens, you end up almost becoming a secret agent and thinking that Burt Reynolds really did spend his whole life with a moustache and a hat, giggling and driving around America with stolen crates of beer and pregnant elephants. Whoa, where did that come from? I don't know. Anyway, Beyond the Pale is a fine song. Fine song. great. Yes, absolutely. Played live at many shows. There's a lovely section in it, and I always love this in bands when the drama happens. When in this particular song, where everything drops out and suddenly it's all quiet, and then there's this tiny pause, in the way that Metallica's "Sad But True" has the heaviest silence in history. And then everything comes back in, and the track is back and alive, and suddenly it's like you've lifted up again, in the way that, for example, when the Pixies and Nirvana did it, they changed keys or they moved up for the chorus and then back down to the verse. It's a sneaky little trick, but it gives the song, just to put it technically, a bit of oomph, and that's what you need. On the LP, the second track is A Wing and a Prayer, and I'll be honest, don't really remember much of A Wing and a Prayer. It's quite good, but it's completely serviceable. It works quite well as a second song, but it again doesn't have anything in particular that I can hold on to in terms of lyrical content. It's designed as a stage-based live rocker, and that's exactly what A Wing and a Prayer does. On the CD, we go to Fabian, which is interesting because it has links to Marianne. This is a Mercy song. The title is very similar. It's got the same kind of, because there's only so many ways you can sing a woman's name, for example. In fact, there's a Belgian playing guitar on it, according to one of the anecdotes in the Wayne Hussey book, but I don't know who that is. Interestingly, I think interestingly is the word, in this book, Wayne is quite clear that he wasn't necessarily the best or most faithful of partners, I think it's fair to say. And he enjoyed the company of strangers on tour. And he found out he was going to become a father. And so there's a lot of songs on children that are about impending fatherhood and his child, about his daughter, and who now would be 35, 36, 37 maybe. Obviously fully formed adult, living their life. And I think it's important, if you are a father, to be as good a one as you can be, to be as present as you can be, and to be as available as you can be. Because I know from people I know that if you have an absent father, that's a difficult place to be. And there's a question around, was I wanted? Was I the product of love? Was I the product of something? And then having, a parent that effectively disowns you is really, really difficult. It has impacts upon ego, impacts upon self-image, self-worth, impacts upon your childhoods. Even down to there not being perhaps a particularly strong male role model in the house. Which, if you want to get all tradwife about it, let's not. The people that are around tell other people what kind of behaviour it's okay to accept, and that's an interesting position to be in. We have, and I'm guessing by the fact that the lyrics are on the CD but not on the gatefold, I'm guessing that the lyrics on the CD on the gatefold are the lyrics as opposed to anything else. And then we have Tower of Strength, which and the segue from Heaven and Earth, which is about his child, for the child is in within you, into Tower of Strength, is magnificent. It's one of the smoothest, sweetest segues between songs I've ever heard, by the way. It's fabulous. Turn over the LP, side 2. We have Kingdom Come, and Kingdom Come is a rocker. Most bands have a track called Kingdom Come, I believe. I've got at least 3 or 4 songs called Kingdom Come. And it's got some lyrics which, I've got to be honest, do not make the slightest lick of sense. Desert rat, cry me wolf, shedding skin upon your lips. I pray for the love of madness, for the hand that takes the grip. And we close our eyes to forgive and forget, rain from heaven. To forgive and forget. And we close our eyes to forgive and forget with bated breath for the kingdom come. Not at all influenced by the We Forgive As We Forget, the water flows under the bridge, rain from heaven, which is by a band called the Sisterhood, featuring Andrew Eldritch of the Sisters of Mercy, which I talked about in a previous episode about the Sisters of Mercy Floodland LP, which is a fantastic record, probably difficult to get. I never understood the lyrics to Kingdom Come. I'm not about to start now. It's more often than not played in a piano format these days, which is a glorious, gorgeous version of the song, and runs very, very well. Better than perhaps the more conventional rock-based track that we have here, which is the same riff but played on a guitar. And sometimes instrumentation and arrangement is really, really important and needs to be counted as part of the writing credits. Kingdom Come was intended as the third single from the album, but because Beyond the Pale got to number 32, Kingdom Come was not released. However, there was a promotional 12-inch of Kingdom Come, which had the tour dates on here: St Austell Coliseum, Portsmouth Guildhall, Manchester Apollo, Edinburgh Playhouse, Newcastle City Hall, and London Wembley Arena. So Birmingham NEC and London Wembley Arena, the two biggest shows on that tour. The shit hit the sheds. It's about 12,000 people each. And this is the Heavenly Mix, which was released eventually as, I think, an extra track on, I think it was the Butterfly on the Wheel release, actually. Could be wrong. And it's a great extended classic old school 80s rock 12-inch. And classic old school rock 12-inches kind of extend the songs out. They allow you to luxuriate in the component forms. They're like the director's cut of a song. And the Heavenly Mix is fabulous. The LP mix, not so much. Track, I'm guessing it's 7 or 8. The second track is Breathe, which is the vocal version, which is available on the 12-inch of Tower of Strength. And around about that time, lots of bands were doing songs called Breathe. Hello, I'm The Cure. I've got a song called The Breathe. And later on, The Prodigy, of course. So every band has to have a song called Breathe. Every band has to have a song called Stay. So The Mission, of course, have Stay With Me. Dave Garn has Stay. U2 have Stay. And Power of Dreams have Stay. Shakespeare's Sister have Stay. You could do an EP of songs just called Stay, by the way. And then there's also, of course, Breathe, which is The Cure, and later on Depeche Mode, and then earlier on, of course, The Mission. And U2 have a song called Breathe as well. So, and Pink Floyd, whoever they are, you might have heard of them, have a song called Breathe. So again, if you could do like a 10-track album. One side is just cover versions of Stay by various bands. Another one is a cover versions of songs called Breathe. That'd be interesting, wouldn't it? Okay. Well, if I was in a band, that might be a thing I'd do. But I'm not in a band. Count yourself lucky. Track 8 on the CD is Child's Play, which comes from a soundcheck jam that the band wrote whilst they were on tour in 1987, and it's about amphetamine and lust in Berlin. Having been to Berlin, I experienced neither, but that's not to say they don't exist. I just maybe went to the wrong bars, or different bars, or perhaps went to bars 30 years later. Child's Play is a banger live. It has a fabulous riff. It cuts like a chainsaw through the air, and I'd love it to be played live more often. Oh, pardon me, sorry. Long day, haven't said much until today. Then we have Shimira Kai, which is, I think, largely inspired by Jez Webb, who was also a roadie for Depeche Mode. And I'm not quite sure what that means, but it's a sleek, short little instrumental. It just kind of disappears out of the ether, and you just don't get a sense that it's a song at all. It's just there, and you blink and you miss it, and it's gone. We have Black Mountain Mist, which I think has backing vocals from Julianne Reagan, Julianne from All About Eve. And Black Mountain Mist is about, well, Black Mountain Mist. And there were Black Mountains in and around Wales, where the album was recorded and demoed in 1987. And it might as well have just had a Led Zeppelin writing credit on it, because it is totally 100% the acoustic stuff, that the acoustic mystical stuff like Misty Mountain Hop and going to California and those type of things that Led Zeppelin did. And I'm not a huge Led Zeppelin guy. I'm far more into another band of the same era called the Pink Floyd. But who knows, I might end up doing NOTCAST about Led Zeppelin at some point. Good God. I've also got the Beatles, I've got the Rolling Stones, I've got loads of bands I could go through. But the thing is, actually, I've thought about doing the Beatles. The Beatles is so intimidating as a subject. I'm not even sure I could get to within 1,000 yards of it being accurate. Nonetheless, Black Mountain Mist, one of the best songs that Led Zeppelin never released. On the CD and tape, we have a cover of the awful Aerosmith's awful 70s MOR classic, Dream On. And then we have the last two songs on the album. One is Heat. There is a Tim Palmer demo of it recorded in August 1987, around about the time of the Reading Festival, that is on the 2008 reissue expanded version of Children. I don't have it because there's only one unreleased song on the 2008 version. It's the demo of Heat, and I didn't see any point in paying 15 quid for a CD just to get one blinking song. Put a second CD on it, now we're talking. Put demos, B-sides, live stuff on. Okay, I'm like the bit of goes, now you've got my attention, like Leonardo DiCaprio in that film. But no, absolutely not. Heat is perfectly cromulent, and I know my brother hates that, but to be fair, I don't agree with a lot of the things he says, so it doesn't matter what he thinks about this. It's a very adequate, very good Mission song, but it doesn't stand out as an amazing, fantastic song that you absolutely have to own and hear. And then the last track on the album is Hymn for America. So I'm worried about America at the moment, and I'm afraid of Americans because I don't think the new incoming president is going to be any good. I try not to have too much politics on the NOTCAST, but I do not live in isolation of the rest of the universe, and so therefore it is fair to say I am not a huge fan of what I think is going to happen in America in the next 4 years. So Hymn for America is a song about having, seen a million faces and rock them all, as Bon Jovi had it, and as detailed in this book here, which, by the way, if you don't own, you can buy, and I think it has a retail price of $16.99. If you're interested in the mission, very interesting, worth reading. And it is an epic. It falls apart and falls into nothingness. And it has, although the song Heat has the lyric "We melt in the heat," Hymn for America has the lyric "God bless you, America, God bless you, America." And the idea of America being this promised land, this place that you were told was going to be full of dreams and amazing things, and you get there and it's like deserts and weeds and expensive hospital visits and guns and cheeseburgers. I've been to America, I can say that. And I know at least one person in America is likely to watch this. So no offence intended, but yes, offence intended at the same time, because I figure America does have a sense of humour. I mean, after all, look at who you voted for president. Whoa, that went dark. And that's the Mission's Children album, which I very, very much like and enjoy, but it is one of the most traditional rock albums I have in my collection, outside of the letters A, C, D, and C, of course. AC/DC, fucking rock. Saw them on my birthday. Amazing, great band. The second single release from the album is, of course, Beyond the Pale. Got to number 32 in the UK pop charts, Pop Pickers, and is backed with 2 extra tracks. One called Forevermore, which is this brilliant, lovely ballad that the band play live occasionally. Was also repurposed for their 1996 album Blue, I believe, in a rearranged fashion. I've got one of the original 1996 vinyl issues of Blue, because it was £3.49. God knows how much it is these days. Probably still £3.49 given the band's commercial potential. And a track called Taduz 1912-1988, which was the name of a neighbour of one of the band members, who I think takes its name from Poland. At this point, the band became pretty big, it's fair to say, and they did that through the old-fashioned ways of becoming pretty big, is that you get on the road, you stay on the road, and you tour until you die. And that was pretty much the way it was going to be. The band played radio sessions, which are detailed again on the 3CD live at the BBC. This has a radio session from late 1988 where the band were effectively demoing their upcoming album, which was untitled. and they played Wembley Arena, which was released as a live album. So there were lots of live releases around about this time, some unofficial, some official. I'll get to the official ones later. Here's two bootleg CDs. The Mission on a Wing of a Butterfly. This was apparently live in Los Angeles in 1990, but looking at the track list, it's a compilation from two shows, one of which I think is the LA Palladium, and the other one of which is Wembley Arena in 1988. This one was released in 1989. It is called Blood Brothers. And again, it's a compilation live in Europe, 1988, 1987. So this is a compilation of material from Wembley Arena and also Reading Festival, I believe. So if you want to get the whole of the or most of the broadcast of the Wembley Arena 1988 show, and you can't find this, then this is a good choice to go for, because it's got most of the show, certainly up to, I think, maybe, let me just quickly check, probably up to Crystal Ocean, Dream On, Sacrilege, Beyond the Pale. So the first 10 tracks on this are taken from Wembley Arena, and the rest are taken from what I think is, they're taken from Reading. So Wastelands and The Dance Goes On Like a Hurricane and Shelter from the Storm are taken from there. Good, not essential. I bought it because I collected bootlegs, not because I felt an absolutely compelling, unavoidable urge to own yet another Mission live thingamy-doodah there. The official release, there was a 1988 fan club release of the Wembley Arena show. And the Wembley Arena show as a whole has been released, but it has been released in two places. So in order to get that, you need to have this 1993's The Mission No Snow No Show for the Eskimo live, contractual obligation album, licensed from the BBC, released in 1993, and this 2008's live at the BBC. This features most of the Wembley Arena show, apart from two songs. The two songs which aren't featured on this are featured on this, and they are Kingdom Come and Deliverance. And I'd like to point out, Kingdom Come and Deliverance are the last two tracks on the third live show, Wembley Arena, Manchester Apollo 1990 on here. So in order to reduce repetition, they've been taken off this release. But between this and that, you get the whole of the Wembley Arena 1988 show that was released. In case, if like me, you are a sad train spotter, then that is exactly what you need to have, is those two releases. No Snow, No Show was released in 1993 when the band were in a difficult period, having fallen from commercial grace, and was released on vinyl. Here's a copy. Not too many of these floating around. This is about an hour of top grade amphetamine fueled rock and roll, with a huge slice of Led Zeppelin inspired pomposity in there, which is my way of saying it's bloody marvellous. And it features 4 songs recorded at Manchester Apollo, and let me just quickly check, 7 recorded at Wembley Arena in 1988. So if you want to get the Wembley Arena show, the best way to get it on vinyl is to get No Snow, No Show. And if you're a fan of the radio sessions, of course you do need to get either Salad Days from 1994, which here's a vinyl version of Salad Days that was released on vinyl, and it came in a gatefold sleeve, and it features all the BBC radio sessions between 1986 and 1990 by the band. So on side 1, we have the sessions from 1986 1987, so that's your first album, including the only studio recording of Shelter from the Storm. Side 2, 1988, December 1988's radio session of Deliverance, Grip of Disease, Belief, and the new version of Kingdom Come. So these were new songs from the upcoming album that the band were playing live. And then the last 2 songs, Butterfly on a Wheel and Bird of Passage, played acoustic on a piano on, I think, Valentine's Day 1990. I remember recording it on a C90 cassette in my dad's living room, my mum and dad's dining room, actually, on a huge silver cassette player that they probably still got, and treasuring those recordings, as indeed I still do, because I own them more than once, and obviously I've got them on vinyl. Of course it sounds better on vinyl. But does it? No, it bloody well doesn't. Stop being a pain. It doesn't sound better on vinyl. Why have you got so much vinyl, Mark? Shush, don't ask questions. They're scary and weird. So, children, effectively, you get the album on CD if you want to get all the tracks. You do need to get the Beyond the Pale CD single, because this contains 3 songs that aren't on the album. Thaddeus, which again I've not pronounced correctly, the original version of Forevermore, and Love Me to Death, an acoustic version of Love Me to Death. I'm not sure if that's been reissued. It almost definitely has. You will also need to get, I'm afraid to say, the Live at the BBC box set from 2008. Deleted quite quickly. The band were probably at one of their lowest points commercially at this point, so a triple CD of radio sessions from a band that used to be famous 18 years ago wasn't going to sell many copies. Of course I bought it at the time, because that's the kind of guy I am. And this features all the radio sessions on disc 1, Reading 1987 on disc 2, split between disc 2 and disc 3, the rest of Wembley Arena 1988, apart from Kingdom Come and Deliverance, and then a truncated version of the Manchester Apollo show from 1990. And I've got to tell you, the Manchester Apollo show from 1990 is amazing. It's one of the best live recordings ever. But that's, as what is it, Max Katana says in The Force Awakens, a tale for another time. Get in the car, no time to argue. The last release from this period, which was not vastly available, probably on YouTube, Fan Club VHS. This is the 2011 DVD version of it. The Mission, South America, 1988. A 60-minute VHS filmed documentary featuring live footage and backstage arsing about from the South American tour of 1988. And this features 5 live songs: Deliverance, The Crystal Ocean, Sacrilege, 1969, and Shelter from the Storm, alongside some footage of Ronnie Biggs and some footage of the Mission generally being drunk. So, for example, although the band didn't think that they were popular there, because they'd only sold 1,000 LPs in South America, what they didn't realise is, for every LP they sold, there were like 10 copies that were being taped by friends, because everyone was so poor. So people would pay to see the shows, they wouldn't pay to see or buy the records. And Severina, I think, was a #1 over there. So by the time that the band were playing South America, they weren't playing Severina. It wasn't in their set lists. And apparently it was extremely unpopular with people, because Severina wasn't in the set lists. And therefore they hastily worked it up and added it back into the set lists for the last few weeks of the 1988 tour, which is featured, obviously, on No Snow, No Show. And that brings that period to a close. So The Mission, 1988, or as someone once said repeatedly on a live album recorded at the band's last show, we'll miss The Mission. So that's The Mission. That's Children album. That's 1987 into 1988. Hopefully you found some music in these Notcasts that you've enjoyed, or maybe you've discounted some music by listening to it and thinking, nah, it's not very good. Mark, why do you like that stuff? Well, the answer is, I like it because I like it. And that's how life is, isn't it? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to wrap up here. I've got a couple of nights out coming up, so it might be a few days until I do another one, but I will see you soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. Alan Fluff Freeman always used to say, if you love somebody, tell them before it's too late. And yeah, stay beautiful, beautiful ones. And I'll see you some other time. Okay. See you later, gang. Bye.